Good evening, and welcome back. Pull your chair closer, wherever you are right now. Whether you're driving through fog on some late-night interstate, folding laundry in a quiet house, or lying in the dark with your phone held above your face in that particular posture of someone who is not quite ready to sleep. Wherever you've found me tonight, I'm glad you came. Drop a location in the comments if you're watching this recorded, or if you're listening live, let me know. I like to picture the geography of you, the scattered coordinates of all the people choosing to spend this hour in this particular darkness with me. Tonight, we go further back than we usually go. Further back than Greece. Further back than Babylon. Further back even than the oldest writing we have managed to decode. Tonight we go to a time when the categories of things had not yet fully settled, when the boundary between the divine and the terrestrial was a membrane rather than a wall, something permeable, something that could be pressed through if you were strong enough, or desperate enough, or simply too curious to turn away. Tonight we talk about the Watchers. Their story is not tidy, it refuses to be. The texts that carry it are plural and contradictory, and sometimes speak in the voices of writers who seem to barely believe what they themselves are writing down, who hedge with phrases like "some accounts hold" and "it is said among the ancients," as though they already sense they are handling material that will burn them if they grip it wrong. I will try to be faithful to that quality. I will try not to smooth away what should remain rough. This is a story about disobedience, yes. About desire, yes. But underneath those things, it is a story about what happens when the structure of the cosmos is violated from within, when those appointed to preserve the order become the instruments of its destruction. It is a story about guilt that cannot be contained, about consequences that cascade beyond anything the original act seemed capable of producing, about a crime so large that its echoes can be heard if you know how to listen all the way down to the present moment. Let us begin then at the beginning, which is to say, let us begin before the beginning, in the only place a beginning can actually be found. Before the world was sorted into its layers, sky above, earth in the middle, waters below, and beneath the waters, whatever lies beneath the waters, there was a state that the oldest texts struggle to name. Some call it void, some call it deep. Some use a word that translates roughly as without form and empty, a doubling of negation that suggests the human impulse to name something by listing what it lacks, because what it lacks is everything. What we can say with reasonable confidence is this: prior to the first ordering, there was no ordering. There were forces, perhaps, energies, presences, something like attention without an object. But there was no above and no below, no before and no after, no here and no there. Into this, or rather out of this, since there was no into yet, came the first act of will. Different traditions name it differently. In some, a word is spoken. In some, a breath is drawn. In some, the first ordering happens through a kind of violent separation, a cleaving, a tearing apart of things that had been undifferentiated. What matters across all versions is the same. The world does not emerge from nothing so much as it emerges from a previous everything, from a state of total undifferentiation, and the act of creation is the act of making distinctions where before there were none. Light from dark, waters above from waters below, dry land from sea, living things from one another, each according to its kind. The world is made in this framework by the continuous act of drawing lines. And then the hierarchies, the oldest tradition we can recover concerning the Watchers. And here I should say plainly that I am drawing primarily on texts preserved in the Ethiopic tradition, on a book called the Book of the Watchers, which comprises the opening section of what is known as First Enoch, though I'm also drawing on parallel traditions in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in certain Aramaic fragments, in later rabbinic elaborations, and in echoes that appear in sources as far-flung as early Christian apocalyptica and certain strands of Mesopotamian cosmological thinking that seem to run underneath all of these like an underground river. The oldest tradition speaks of a rank of divine beings created not after the world, but alongside it, or perhaps before it, in the same primordial moment when distinctions first began to be drawn. These beings were called, in some traditions, the sons of God, in others, the holy ones. In the Enochic literature that concerns us most directly tonight, they are called the Watchers, Irin in the Aramaic. The word means approximately those who are awake, those who do not sleep. This is their function and their name simultaneously. They are defined by their wakefulness, by their perpetual attentiveness, by the ceaseless quality of their gaze directed downward toward the world below them, because they are above. This matters. The cosmology that underlies the Watcher tradition is one in which the divine realm and the terrestrial realm are vertically arranged, heaven above, earth below, and the Watchers occupy a station near the top, in what certain texts call the firmament or the heights, or simply the place where God's throne is surrounded by its court. They are, in the celestial bureaucracy, a kind of senior order, ancient, powerful, possessed of knowledge that the world below has not yet received, charged with the responsibility of oversight. They watch. That is what they do. That is what they were made to do. The world below them is new and busy and full of the particular chaotic energy of something that has only just been sorted out. Humans have been made. Humans are doing what humans do, multiplying, spreading across the face of the newly dry land, building things, tearing things down, learning slowly and painfully how to be alive. They are beautiful, and they are stupid, and they are mortal, which means they are defined by their ending even at the moment of their beginning. And the Watchers look down at all of this from their high and luminous station, and they watch. They watch for a very long time. It is worth dwelling here for a moment on what that watching must have been. Imagine a form of attention with no distraction, no fatigue, no wandering. Imagine seeing the entire surface of the young earth laid out below you like a map that breathes and moves and makes noise. The smoke of early fires, the sound of voices in languages still new enough to be exciting, the sight of human bodies moving through landscapes that are also new. The Watchers have knowledge, and they have power, and they have proximity to the divine source of both, and yet they are distinctly and precisely not what they watch. They are not human. They do not grow old. They do not die. They do not know the particular texture of desire that comes from being finite in an infinite world, from wanting things you cannot have because there is not enough time to have them. Some accounts hold that it was this, the wanting, the awareness of wanting, the particular vertigo of watching desire in operation in creatures so different from themselves, that undid them. Others say it was simpler than that. It was the daughters of men. The daughters of men were very beautiful, and the watchers saw them, and they wanted them, and wanting them, they made a decision. The decision is the hinge of the whole story. Everything before it is prologue. Everything after it is consequence. The decision was made by a leader. This too is important. The watchers did not simply fall individually, each one separately succumbing to desire in the privacy of his own ruin. They deliberated, they planned, they took an oath. His name, in most versions of the text, is Shemihaza, sometimes rendered Semjaza or Samyaza, or a handful of other transliterations from the Aramaic. He is the chief of the Watchers, which means he is both the most powerful among them and the most responsible for what they collectively do. And what Shemihaza says to the others at the moment when the decision crystallizes is something like this: I fear that you will not do this thing with me, and I alone will have to bear the guilt of a great sin. Read that again. He is not afraid of punishment. He is afraid of being left alone with the guilt. There is something psychologically precise in this that the text does not comment on, as though it does not notice what it has recorded. Shemihaza is the leader. Shemihaza has presumably spoken first, has presumably articulated the desire, has presumably been the one to frame the transgression as a possibility rather than an impossibility. And yet, his fear is not that the transgression will be discovered, not that the punishment will be severe, not that he is doing something wrong. It is that his companions will change their minds and leave him to carry the sin alone. He's thinking about the distribution of guilt before the guilt has been incurred. He is negotiating the architecture of shared culpability in advance. The others respond. They make an oath, binding themselves together in the common enterprise. 200 of them, by one count, descend on a mountain. The mountain is called Hermon, which some texts note means cursed or devoted to destruction, an etymology that may be folk etymology, a retrospective meaning assigned to a place by people who already know what happened there. Whether the etymology is accurate matters less than the fact that the text includes it. Someone thought it was meaningful. Someone wanted you to notice. They descend. They take wives from among the daughters of men. They teach. The teaching is the second great transgression, and it may, in some ways, be the larger one. The Watchers do not merely desire the daughters of men. They bring knowledge with them. They share what they know, and what they know is, from the perspective of the divine ordering, forbidden not because it is bad in itself, but because it disrupts the appointed sequence of things, the careful calibration of what human beings are supposed to know at what point in their development. The Watchers teach enchantments and root cutting. They teach the cutting of metals and the making of weapons and the smiting of the earth. They teach the signs of the sun and the courses of the moon. They teach cosmetics and jewelry making and the dyeing of fabrics, which sounds less dangerous than weapons making, until you understand that within this tradition, those things are equally disruptive. They are the knowledge of how to be beautiful, how to make yourself more than you naturally are, how to use the materials of the world to augment the self. And that impulse in this framework is understood as a kind of hubris, a reaching beyond the appointed station. They teach. The world receives the teaching. And what the world produces from this teaching is not wisdom, but enormity. I need to pause here, because the transition from the act of transgression to its consequences is one of the strangest things in this whole literature. Strange in a way that I think is intentional. Strange in a way that maps onto something real about how catastrophe actually unfolds. The consequences do not arrive immediately. The watchers descend, the women conceive, time passes, and what is born from those unions is not quite what anyone, not the watchers, not the women, not whatever version of the divine is overseeing all of this, appears to have anticipated. What is born is the giants. Let us try to understand what is meant by giants here, because the word in English carries a certain cultural freight, pantomime, fairy tale, big men with clubs, that does not quite capture what the Enochic texts are describing. The giants of this tradition are not merely large. They are fundamentally wrong. They are wrong in the way that a chemical compound is wrong when its components should not have been combined. They have the properties of both their parents, but in a proportion that neither parent could contain. They are part divine and part mortal, and that combination in a world organized around the careful separation of divine and mortal is a catastrophe. Some texts say they grew to enormous physical size, 300 cubits in one account, this is a difficult number to visualize, something in the range of 150 meters, which is to say, taller than most modern buildings, which is probably not meant to be taken literally, but is meant to convey a quality of overabundance, of excess, of something grown past all natural proportion. They ate everything. They consumed what the humans produced, and then they consumed the humans themselves, and then they consumed each other, and then, in one of the most disturbing passages in the text, they began to drink blood. Not as a metaphor, literally, they had exhausted all other sources of sustenance, and they turned to blood, which in this tradition is the seat of life itself, which is to say, they were consuming the animating principle of living things, which is another way of saying they were unmaking creation, dissolving it back toward the formless state from which it had been separated. This is the shape of the catastrophe. It is not a single dramatic event, but an accelerating unraveling. The watchers bring forbidden knowledge. The offspring of their unions turn that knowledge toward destruction. The destruction grows until the world itself is being consumed. And all of this has its origin in that moment on the mountain, that oath, that descent. But there is another piece. Among the watchers who descended, there is a figure who outranks even Shemihaza in the magnitude of what he teaches. His name is Azazel, and he is the one who teaches the making of weapons, swords, shields, breastplates, and also the knowledge of metals, the knowledge of the earth's hidden veins of ore and how to extract and work them, and also the things that seem less dangerous, but perhaps are not. The knowledge of how to beautify the human face, how to use antimony and minerals and pigments to make the human form more than it is. Azazel is the great technologist of the Transgression, the one who gives humanity the tools that will allow it to destroy itself faster and more efficiently than it could have managed on its own. There is something. I'm not entirely sure how to frame this, and I'll put it in and let you decide whether it belongs. There is something in the figure of Azazel that the text seems to find more disturbing than the sexual transgression of the other watchers. Shemihaza's sin is legible. Desire, weakness, the failure to resist something beautiful. Azazel's sin is colder. He's not overtaken by desire. He chooses to teach. He makes a considered decision to transfer knowledge across the boundary that was supposed to prevent such transfer. And the text treats this as, if anything, the primary crime. When the divine punishment is announced, it is Azazel who is specifically designated as bearing responsibility for all the evil in the world, not Shemihaza. Azazel, the teacher. Let me collect the thread here, because we are about to turn a corner. The world is now corrupted, full of giants consuming everything, full of human beings who have been taught to make weapons and who are using them on each other, full of the knowledge of enchantments, which means the knowledge of how to bend the natural order to personal will, which is essentially what the Watchers themselves did. And so the humans are now doing what the Watchers modeled, reaching past the station they were assigned, using knowledge they were not meant to have, disrupting the order that was made for them, and the sound of the world's crying. This image appears explicitly in the text, rises up, it ascends, it reaches the high places where the angels who did not descend still stand at their watchposts, and those angels hear it, and they bring it to the divine throne, and the question is put, what will be done? The question of what will be done is the hinge between the catastrophe and the response, and the response is itself a revelation of how this cosmological system is organized, because the response does not come as a single, simple, immediate annihilation. It comes in stages assigned to specific agents, each with a specific jurisdiction. 4 figures step forward, or rather, 4 figures are called forward. Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, Uriel. Each is given a task. Raphael is sent to bind Azazel. The binding that Raphael performs is striking in its details. Azazel is to be bound hand and foot and cast into the darkness under the earth, into a specific desert that one text names as Dudail, and he is to be covered with rough and jagged rocks, and his face is to be covered so that he cannot see the light. This is not death. This is not even punishment in the sense of inflicted suffering, though it may be suffering. It is containment. It is the removal of Azazel from the world in a way that corresponds structurally to what Azazel did to the world. He hid things in the earth, the ore and the knowledge of the ore, and now he himself is hidden in the earth. He is to remain there until the day of judgment, at which point he will be cast into the fire. This is an explicitly temporary measure. The punishment has an end date, which tells us that the story is not over at this point, that the cosmic accounting is not yet settled, that Azazel bound in the earth under rocks is a placeholder, not a resolution. Michael is sent to tell Shemihaza and the other watchers what is coming. This too is interesting. They are told. The announcement of their punishment precedes the punishment, which gives them a period of knowing, of sitting with the knowledge of what they have done and what it has cost. Their sons, the giants, will be destroyed, And here the text is specific and grim. The giants will be turned against each other, made to kill each other in mutual slaughter, which has the quality of a kind of cosmic cleanup, using the instruments of destruction to destroy themselves. And the Watchers themselves will be bound in the valleys of the earth for 70 generations before their final judgment. 70 generations. The number is not casual. 70 generations is a span of time that human beings can barely conceptualize. It stretches from any given moment back past everything within living memory, past history into legend, past legend into myth. The Watchers will spend that span bound in the earth, aware, unable to act, watching from underground as the consequences of their act continue to unfold above them. Gabriel is sent against the bastard spirits, a phrase that the text uses for the offspring of the Watchers, the half-divine children who are ravaging the earth. Gabriel is to destroy them, to produce in them a self-destroying war, to set them against each other until they annihilate themselves by their own weapons. Uriel is sent to tell a man named Noah. Noah is the pivot point of the whole apparatus. He is the human through whom the reset will be accomplished, the one designated not to fight the catastrophe, but to survive it, to carry through the flood that will be sent to cleanse the earth, the seed of what will come next. His story is, in some ways, the simplest in this whole elaborate cosmological drama. He is told what is coming. He is told what to do. And he does it. He does not argue. He does not negotiate. He builds what he is asked to build. He gathers what he is asked to gather. And he waits. But before we get to Noah properly, I want to say something about the structure of this moment in the narrative, because it does something that I think is theologically and psychologically significant, and that tends to get lost in the reading. The divine response to the catastrophe does not begin with the flood. It begins with the binding of Azazel and the announcement to the Watchers, which means, first, the sources of contamination are neutralized. Then, the products of contamination are destroyed. Then the world is cleaned. The order matters. You don't start with the flood. You start by addressing what caused the need for the flood. This is the part I'm less sure about. The part I'll put in and let you decide. This is a model for something, for a kind of thinking about problems in which you cannot address symptoms until you have addressed causes, in which the cleaning has to wait while the source of the dirt is dealt with. Whether this is intentional theology or retrospective pattern finding on my part, I genuinely cannot tell you. But the order of operations strikes me as careful, and I think it was meant to. The flood comes, the earth is covered, everything that has been contaminated is wiped away, and what comes through is Noah and his family and the paired creatures and the implicit promise that the world will be remade on better terms. Some say the terms were not in fact better. Some say the flood did not solve the problem it was meant to solve, because the problem was not contamination of the world from outside. It was a flaw in the arrangement that allowed the Watchers to descend in the first place, a gap in the structure of the cosmos that desire could pass through. And that gap, as we will see, was not closed by the flood. It was merely papered over, a temporary ceiling that would not hold. Yet that is a story for another day, or rather, for later in this one. Let us now speak of the figures. The heroes, if that word can be applied here, though several of them are heroes only in the way that a fire is heroic, bright, consumptive, not quite controllable. The actors through whom the story moves, and who are themselves moved by it. Enoch comes first. Enoch is, within this tradition, the most important human being who ever lived. And the reason he is the most important is this: he did not die. The text that records his life says only that he walked with God, and then he was not, for God took him. This is extraordinary. In a genealogy full of people who lived hundreds of years and then died, Enoch simply stops dying. He is removed. He is taken. He goes up rather than down. But before that, and this is what makes him the narrative center of the Watcher tradition, Enoch becomes an intermediary. When the Watchers have descended and their crimes are known and the divine judgment has been announced, the Watchers do something unexpected. They ask Enoch to intercede for them. They want him to carry a petition upward to plead their case before the divine throne. Enoch, who is human, who is mortal, who belongs by nature to the world below, becomes the messenger between the condemned Watchers and the court that has condemned them. He is a strange figure to choose. He has no power. He has no authority. He has no leverage. He is a man, which in this cosmological framework means he is dust with a soul temporarily attached, the least significant class of being in a hierarchy that places angels above archangels, above the divine throne's inner circle. And yet the Watchers choose him, perhaps because he is the only one who can move between the two realms without being himself suspect. Perhaps because his very insignificance makes him acceptable as a messenger. He carries the petition, but he does not add to it. He is a conduit rather than an advocate, a vessel rather than a voice. Enoch takes the petition. He reads it. He goes to the water of Dan, south of Hermon, the mountain where the Watchers descended, the cursed mountain. And there, at the water, he falls asleep, and in his sleep, he is shown things. A vision comes to him of the divine court, of the throne, and the fire that surrounds it, and the angels that stand before it, and the voice that speaks from within it. And the voice speaks, and what the voice says is, the petition is denied. Go back and tell them. Enoch is instructed. Tell them their petition has not been granted. Tell them that they will not have peace. Tell them what I have told you about what will happen to them and to their sons, and leave them without hope of intercession. Enoch goes back. He tells them, there is something almost unbearably sad in this, if you sit with it. The Watchers, who are made to be awake, are condemned to a different kind of wakefulness, the wakefulness of those who know their fate and cannot escape it, who are bound in the valleys of the earth for 70 generations, knowing exactly what they did and what it cost. Enoch delivers this message and then steps away from the story, steps away from the world, and does not die. He carries the knowledge of what he has seen, the vision of the divine court, the structure of the cosmos, the names of the stars and the spirits that govern them, the calendar of the heavens, the architecture of judgment. And that knowledge is the inheritance he leaves. The books attributed to him, the Enochic literature, are the record of what was shown to a man who went up and came back down, or went up and never came back down, depending on the version. His birth, if we go back to it, is unremarkable by the standards of the tradition. He is the 7th generation from Adam, which is itself significant in a numerological sense, 7 being the number of completion, of the week, of the days it took to make the world. He is, in the calculus of the tradition, the 7th attempt at a human being that fully succeeded, the one who reached the form of humanity that the design required. And because he reached it, he did not have to die. He was already, in some sense, done. His education is the cosmos itself. He does not have a mentor in the conventional sense. He has a series of angelic guides who show him, on his celestial journeys, what the world is made of and how it works. The storehouses of snow and wind, the prisons of the disobedient stars, the places prepared for the souls of the dead, the structure of the heavens in their multiple layers. He is given, essentially, the complete technical manual for reality, and he is given it because he will need to report it, to write it down, to leave it for the generations that follow him. His task, seen from this angle, is not heroism in the usual sense. He does not fight anyone. He does not kill a monster, or rescue a captive, or win a war. His task is witnessing and recording. He is the great scribe of the tradition, the one who receives and transmits, the first prophet in the sense of someone who speaks not from personal authority, but from what was shown to him from elsewhere. His success is that the transmission worked. The knowledge made it through. His legacy is the text itself, the literature that carries his name, which is why the Enochic tradition was taken so seriously in certain communities, and why its loss from the main canon. It is not in the Hebrew Bible, not in most Christian Old Testaments, was felt by those communities as a kind of second theft. He walked with God, he was not, for God took him. That is a sentence that I have never fully figured out how to read. It has the flatness of absolute certainty. It states an impossibility with complete confidence and expects you to accept it. I do accept it. I'm not sure I have a choice. Now, Azazel. I am spending more time on Azazel than probably any balanced account would justify, but I find him genuinely compelling in a way I can't fully account for. And this is the kind of writing where that matters. He is not the leader. He does not take the oath. He is not the first to speak or the last to be silent. He is a particular kind of figure, the technologist of the catastrophe, the one whose contribution is knowledge rather than desire, craft rather than passion. His birth is not recounted. He arrives in the story already present, already formed, already possessed of the knowledge that will make him dangerous. This is itself revealing. The tradition is not interested in how Azazel became what he is, only in what he does when he gets the chance to do it. What he does is teach, swords and shields and armor, the cutting and working of metals, the knowledge of how to find and extract what is hidden in the earth. And alongside this is the part that the text pairs with the weapons, as though they belong together, as though they are equally threatening. The knowledge of how to beautify the human form. Antimony, gemstones, the use of natural pigments to alter the appearance of the face and body. Why are these paired? What does cosmetics have to do with swords? The tradition's implicit answer, I think, is this. Both are forms of making yourself more than you are. Both are forms of reaching past what you were given towards something you were not given. The sword lets you take by force. what would otherwise be withheld from you. The cosmetic lets you appear to be something other than what you are, lets you manipulate how others see you, lets you intervene in the gap between your nature and its presentation. They are both, in the deeper sense, technologies of exceeding your station. And station, in this cosmological framework, is everything. The whole disaster of the Watchers is that they left their station. Azazel teaches the humans to do the same thing, in miniature, with their own selves. He is bound, at the end, in the earth, face covered, unable to see the light. There is something fitting in this that the text doesn't need to point out. The one who taught humans to alter their faces and adorn themselves with beauty has his own face covered. The one who revealed what was hidden in the earth is himself hidden in the earth. The binding is not merely punishment, it is a kind of structural commentary, a cosmological rhyme. And yet, on the day of judgment, it is upon Azazel that all the sins of the world will be laid. This is the phrase the text uses, and it echoes forward or backward, depending on your position in time, into the ritual of the scapegoat, the goat for Azazel, which appears in Leviticus. The goat that carries the sins of the community into the wilderness, into the desert where Azazel is bound, to the place of his binding. The ritual of atonement involves, in some sense, returning the sins to their source, sending back across centuries of accumulated human wickedness the original debt. Whether the Leviticus ritual and the Enochic tradition are aware of each other, whether they are drawing from a common source, or whether one is commentary on the other, is a question that scholars have not resolved to their own satisfaction, and that I will not pretend to resolve here. What I will say is that the convergence is striking, and that striking convergences tend to mean something, even when you can't say precisely what. Shemihaza is easier to describe and harder to feel. He is the leader. He speaks first. He fears being left alone with the guilt. He takes the oath. He descends. He takes wives. His sons are among the giants. He is condemned. What is interesting about Shemihaza is not anything particular about him, but the quality of his leadership, which is the leadership of someone who needs companions in transgression, who cannot sin alone, who requires the oath, who structures the collective crime before any individual crime has been committed. This is not the psychology of a lone rebel. This is the psychology of a committee. Shemihaza doesn't fall like Lucifer falls in the old tradition, alone, proud, flaming downward in magnificent solitude. Shemihaza falls sideways into a group decision, binding himself to 200 others before he will take the first step. Some accounts hold that after the giants are destroyed and before the final binding, Shemihaza does something unexpected. He repents, not formally, not in a way that achieves anything, but in the sense of being overwhelmed by what he has done, of looking at the devastation of the world below and understanding it as his work, of feeling the weight of the oath he made and what that oath produced. In these accounts, he hangs himself in the sky, suspended between earth and heaven, upside down, neither belonging to one place nor the other. It is a punishment he assigns himself in the absence of any other place to put himself. I am not sure this account is accurate, but I find it believable, which is its own kind of truth. His legacy is the model of collective transgression. He demonstrates that divine beings can fail not through individual arrogance, but through the dynamics of group agreement, that the structure of shared oath can turn 200 individual hesitations into a single, irresistible force. This is perhaps more frightening than Azazel's cold knowledge. At least knowledge has a source and a specificity. Shemihaza shows us that numbers can be the source, that enough beings agreeing to cross a line can create a momentum that no individual among them might have found on his own. The figure of Noah needs to be taken seriously, even though he is, on the surface, a reactive character rather than an active one. He does not choose his role. He is chosen. He does not quest for his purpose. His purpose arrives at his door, delivered by an angel with instructions. But Noah's giftedness is, within this tradition, not passivity. It is a quality of essential intactness. The word used for him in some formulations is temima, complete, whole, not mixed. He's pure in his generations, which in the context of this story means his ancestry has not been contaminated by the unions of the Watchers and the daughters of men. He is, in a very precise sense, still human, still entirely, originally, what humans were meant to be before the mixing happened. This intactness is his qualification. He is not the most brilliant or the most powerful or the most virtuous in any ostentatious sense. He is simply what he was made to be, unchanged, unaugmented, and in a world where the augmentation has become catastrophic, simple intactness is a form of radical purity. His task, once it is explained to him, is not heroic in the narrative sense. He builds, he gathers, he waits. When the flood comes, he is inside what he built. When the flood recedes, he comes out. He offers what he is supposed to offer. He receives the covenant, the rainbow, the promise that this particular form of destruction will not be used again. The covenant is itself significant as a structural element of the story, because it is one of the first appearances of a binding promise in this cosmological framework. The divine power that condemned the Watchers and sent the flood now binds itself. It will not flood the world again. It has done something that cannot be undone, has established a precedent that it then limits. This is the founding of a kind of cosmic legal principle. The power that makes the laws can also be bound by them, or at least can choose to bind itself, which amounts to the same thing in practical terms. Noah comes through the flood, and what he comes through into is, in some sense, a new world, though it is the same world cleaned. The mountains are still there. The waters recede back into their proper places. The dry land reappears. Everything is reset, except that the things that caused the reset are still there, bound in the earth, waiting for the day of judgment that has not yet come. The flood did not solve the problem. It addressed the symptoms. The disease remained, pressed underground, awaiting its next opportunity. Anyway, there is a figure that moves in the background of all these events who deserves more attention than I am about to give him. And I know that is unfair, and I am going to do it anyway because the alternative is to restructure everything, and I have already committed to this shape. His name is Methuselah, and he is the oldest human being in the record, 969 years, if you take the numbers literally. And what he represents within the Enochic tradition is the transmission. He is the son of Enoch and the grandfather of Noah, which means He is the human link in the chain between the great receiver and the great survivor, the conduit through whom the knowledge Enoch received can pass to the generation that will need it most. He is given texts. He is instructed to preserve them. He does so. He lives almost 1,000 years, perhaps because of the texts require that long to properly preserve, perhaps because the tradition simply cannot let go of him until Noah is established and the chain of transmission secured. He dies the year the flood comes. This is noted in the chronology with what feels like deliberate placement. He lives until the last possible moment before the catastrophe he helped to prevent, or rather, to survive. He does not go into the ark. He does not need to. He was never going to be the one who came through. He was always the keeper, not the carrier. 969 years of keeping something intact, and then the flood. The great collective event is the flood itself, and to understand it as a collective event rather than a private story, you have to hold in your mind simultaneously everything that has been happening. The watchers bound in the valleys, the giants destroying everything, Azazel covered in rocks under the earth, Enoch gone up and not coming back, Methuselah keeping the texts, Noah building. All of these are happening in what the tradition treats as the same historical moment, the same catastrophic century or centuries when the world has been so distorted by the original transgression that it cannot be sustained in its current form. The flood is not, in this reading, a story about rain. It is a story about the limits of what creation can absorb before it needs to be reset. The earth cries out. This image of the earth itself crying, of creation as something that can suffer and that communicates its suffering upward. The earth cries out, and the crying is heard, and the answer is water, not fire, not plague, not the destruction of the guilty alone. Water, which covers everything indiscriminately, which cannot be argued with, which does not make distinctions. The distinctions were made at the beginning, when light was separated from dark, and water above from water below. The flood is the partial undoing of those distinctions. The waters above and below are reunited, temporarily, catastrophically, and the world that was made between them is submerged. Noah floats on top of it. He floats for 150 days by one count, which is 5 months, which is long enough that the waiting itself becomes a kind of event, a period of suspension between the old world and the new one. Inside the ark, in the dark and the smell of animals, time passes. The rain stops, the waters recede, the mountaintops appear. He sends a raven, which does not come back. He sends a dove, which does come back, and then sends it again. And the second time, it returns with an olive leaf, which is how the tradition knows the waters have receded to the point where trees are visible again, where the world is solid enough for leaves to grow. He comes out. What he finds when he comes out is the world empty. The old contamination scrubbed away, the old human populations gone, the old structures destroyed, the air clean and strange. He builds an altar. He makes an offering. The smoke rises, and then the covenant, the rainbow, the promise, the beginning of what will be called the Noahide covenant, the basic terms under which the relationship between the divine and the human will be organized going forward, terms that are considered, within certain traditions, to be binding on all of humanity regardless of any subsequent covenant, more specific to any particular people. The world begins again. Some say it is better. Some say the terms of the second world are an improvement on the terms of the first, that the covenant introduces a principle of accountability, of law, that was not present in the original creation. Some say it is worse, that the bound watchers will not remain bound forever, that the flood did not touch the source of the problem, that the giants destroyed their bodies, but their spirits survived, and those surviving spirits are what the tradition calls demons, the unhoused intelligences of the hybrid dead wandering the earth without bodies, seeking embodiment wherever they can find it, which is to say, seeking to perpetuate through human bodies the same mixing that produced them. The flood is over. The demons remain. I should say something about the dimensions of what we are talking about when we talk about the aftermath, the period between the flood and the final judgment, the long stretch of time, 70 generations of watchers bound underground by one count, during which the consequences of the original crime continue to reverberate. Because this is where most of human history takes place. This is the era we live in, according to the tradition. The watchers are still bound. Azazel is still under rocks in Dudale. The final judgment has not come, and the effects of the transgression, the knowledge that was not supposed to be given, the mixing that was not supposed to happen, the spirits of the giants wandering without bodies, these are all still operative, all still shaping what happens in the world. The tradition of the ages, the sense that time moves through stages of increasing corruption, finds one of its expressions here. The world of the Watchers is a second generation world, already fallen from the original goodness of the creation, already marked by the first disobedience, and then catastrophically disrupted by the Watcher transgression. What comes after the flood is a third generation world, carrying the accumulated marks of two falls rather than one, and the tradition's general expectation, the expectation that runs through the Enochic literature, through the apocalyptic texts that descend from it, through certain strands of early Christian writing and later Jewish apocalyptica, is that time continues to degrade, that the third generation world will produce further corruptions, further falls, until the accumulation becomes sufficient to trigger the final judgment. The ages are not just a framework for understanding the past. They are a predictive model. They tell you where you are by telling you where things have been. You are in the long middle, in the era of the bound watchers and the wandering demon spirits, in the time between the flood and the judgment. You are in the era that was always going to be exactly like this. There is a kind of grim comfort in this, if you let yourself feel it. The badness of the current moment is not a surprise. It was anticipated. It was described in advance. You are living in a text that was written before you were born, and the text says, yes, it is like this. It will continue to be like this, and then it will end. The question of fate, what the tradition calls, in various forms, the idea that some things are written, that some outcomes are sealed in advance, that the freedom of the actors is real but operates within a structure that ultimately shapes everything toward a predetermined end. This question sits at the heart of the Watcher tradition and is never fully resolved in the text. The Watchers were created free. They were free to descend or not to descend. They chose. The humans were created free. They were free to receive the Watcher's knowledge or not, to use it as they used it or not. They chose. Noah was free. He chose to build, but he also could have refused. The freedom is real. The tradition insists on this, because without it, the condemnation doesn't make sense. You cannot condemn someone for doing what they could not have failed to do, and yet some things are written. The flood was going to come. The judgment is going to come. Azazel will be cast into the fire on the day of judgment. Shemihaza and the others will be bound for 70 generations and then judged. These things are described in advance, sometimes in precise detail, and the description is itself a kind of proof that they will happen, because the one who describes them is the one who controls the calendar. The tradition handles this tension, to the extent it handles it at all, by distinguishing between what the actors choose within their particular moments and what the structure of time itself requires across all moments. The Watchers chose to descend. The structure of time required that this descent would lead to a certain kind of consequence. Their choice was real, but it was also the trigger for a sequence that was already loaded. The gun was already pointed. They pulled the trigger freely. Both things are true. This is not a comfortable position. Philosophically, the tradition does not seem to expect it to be comfortable. Comfort is not the point. The point is to be accurate. What the tradition is saying, underneath all the narrative, is something like this. The world is not random. The suffering that happens in it is not arbitrary. The crimes that were committed freely, and they are being paid for slowly across generations in a currency that is difficult to count, but that is being counted. And at the end of all the counting, there will be a judgment, and the judgment will be complete, and nothing will be left out. Whether this is reassuring depends entirely on what you have done. The demons are worth more attention than they usually get in popular treatments of this material. When the giants, the offspring of the Watchers, and the daughters of men are destroyed either by each other in the mutual slaughter Gabriel arranges, or by the flood, or by both in sequence, their bodies are destroyed, but their spirits persist. This is the logic of the hybrid nature. The mortal part dies because it was mortal, but the divine part does not because it cannot. The spirits of the dead giants are left in the world, incorporeal, unstable, driven by appetites that no longer have bodies to be satisfied in. These spirits, the tradition calls them evil spirits, unclean spirits, demons, become the agents of everything that goes wrong in the world after the flood. They afflict humans. They cause disease and confusion. They appear in visions and in madness. They seek bodies, any bodies, to inhabit temporarily, and their inhabitation is what the tradition understands as possession, as the particular kind of corruption that comes from within. There is a moment in the text, one of the strangest and most poignant in the whole tradition, where the demon spirits petition. They want, specifically, to remain in the world. They are afraid of being destroyed outright, and a compromise is reached. The larger number will be bound, but a 10th part will be allowed to remain on the earth to afflict humans until the final judgment. A tenth. Why a tenth? The tradition does not say, but 1/10 of the spirits of dead giants loose in the world is still an enormous number of spirits, given how many giants there were, and those spirits are still there in the tradition's understanding, still working, still afflicting, still serving as the explanation for why the human world is the way it is even after the flood cleaned everything else up. The remnant is the hinge, the remainder of the catastrophe, preserved by decree, inhabiting the world not as a punishment for humanity, but as a consequence that could not be entirely removed without also removing something else. What exactly, the text does not specify, but the logic seems to be that total removal is not the same as judgment, and the tradition requires judgment, complete and final, rather than the incremental cleanup of partial solutions. The knowledge that was transmitted through Enoch, through Methuselah, to the texts that carry their names, is itself a kind of demon spirit in the cultural sense. It will not die. It has been suppressed, excluded from certain canons, declared apocryphal or pseudepigraphical or simply dangerous and set aside. And yet it persists. It turns up in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which means it was being read in a community in the desert in the first centuries before the Common Era. It turns up in early Christian texts, where the Watchers are referenced by writers who seem to assume their readers already know the story. It turns up in Jude, in 2 Peter, in compressed but unmistakable form. It turns up in Islamic traditions that speak of fallen angels named Harut and Marut, who teach human beings forbidden knowledge. It turns up in, and here's the thing that always surprises people, it turns up in Tolkien, who is a medievalist and a theologian, and who built his cosmology of fallen Maya and the corrupting knowledge of the rings, with a clear structural awareness of the Watcher tradition, whether or not he drew directly from it. The story does not die. This is the thing about a story that names something real. It cannot be killed by exclusion from the official record. It simply changes containers. It passes from sacred text to apocrypha, to literary influence, to structural mythology, to the deep grammar of how we tell certain kinds of stories. And in that last form, it is perhaps most alive, because it operates below the level of conscious reference, shaping narratives that have never heard of Shemihaza or Azazel, but that nonetheless follow the logic of their fall. The gifted one who teaches what should not be taught, the collective descent from the place of watching into the place of acting, the knowledge that empowers and destroys, the binding that contains but does not resolve, the long wait for the judgment that will finally settle the account. We tell this story constantly. We tell it every time a technology is released into the world before the ethics of its use are worked out. Every time knowledge arrives before wisdom. Every time the gift and the weapon are the same object. We tell it every time a trusted guardian abandons the post to pursue something below. We tell it every time a collective decision makes possible what no individual would have dared alone. Anyway, let me tell you what I think the Watcher tradition is actually about. Not what it says it's about. The fall of divine beings, the corruption of the world, the necessity of the flood. But what it is about underneath those things. what it is reaching for with its strange imagery and its contradictory accounts and its refusal to give a clean moral. I think it is about the pain of distance. The watchers are watchers. They are made to watch from above, which means they are made to be separated from what they observe. They can see everything. They cannot touch anything. They can know everything. They cannot feel anything. Or rather, they cannot feel it in the particular way that proximity produces, the way that touching something changes both the thing touched and the toucher. They are made for a relationship to the world that is fundamentally asymmetric, all sight, no contact. And what breaks them is the sight of beauty that they cannot not want. The daughters of men were very beautiful. The text keeps saying this as though it is explanation enough, and maybe it is. The watchers had been watching for what the text implies is a very long time, watching the world below them grow and change and fill with human beings, watching those human beings make fires and build things and move across the landscape in the particular way that embodied creatures move, constrained by gravity and time, gorgeous and brief. And the watching was fine, probably, as long as it stayed abstract, as long as the beauty below was beautiful in the way that a painting is beautiful, at a distance, unchanging, contained within its frame. And then it became something else. The daughters of men were very beautiful, and the watchers were watching and the wanting grew. And what grew from the wanting was action, the decision to descend, the oath, the first breach of the membrane that separated above from below. The tragedy is not that they wanted. The tragedy is that the wanting was built into the situation, that you cannot make a class of beings whose function is to watch beauty without eventually creating in them the desire to stop watching and start touching. The design contains the failure. The vocation contains the temptation. The oversight contains the seeds of the oversight's abandonment. Whether this is a flaw in the design, a choice by the designer, or simply a feature of any arrangement in which knowing and being separate, in which consciousness is separated from its object, the tradition does not say. It does not ask the question directly, but the shape of the story implies it, the way a well-made argument implies its premises, even when it doesn't state them. The tradition is, in the deepest sense, a meditation on what happens when the lines drawn at creation are violated, and the lines that were drawn at creation were not arbitrary. They were the condition of the world's existence. Light and dark had to be separated, not because darkness is evil, but because without the separation there is no world, only undifferentiation. Water above and water below had to be separated, not because the waters themselves required moral categorization, but because only in the space between the separations could living things exist. The dry land had to be separated from the sea, the species from each other, the divine from the terrestrial. These separations are what the world is. The watchers breach the most fundamental of these separations, the one between the divine and the terrestrial. They cross the line that makes both of them possible. And what happens is what always happens when the conditions of existence are violated. The things that exist start to come apart. The giants are the visible form of this coming apart. Creatures that are two things at once, that were not meant to be two things at once, whose existence is a living contradiction of the structure that makes life possible, who are therefore inexorably destructive. They cannot help it. They are the embodiment of the contradiction, and the contradiction is lethal. The flood is the necessary correction, but the correction is also a tragedy, because what is corrected cannot be corrected without destroying what was built between the original creation and the moment of correction. Everything the flood removes, all the lives, all the things, all the accumulated human effort, this was real. This was not garbage. It was the product of the real world, built by real creatures who did not ask to be born in the middle of a catastrophe not of their making. The flood is just, the flood is terrible. Both of these are true. Somewhere in the last years of the Second Temple period, in communities that were thinking hard about their own exile and their own suffering and their own sense of being caught between divine promise and divine silence, the Watcher tradition became a lens. It explained something. It answered, or seemed to answer, the question that disaster always raises. Why did this happen? What did we do? What is wrong with the structure of the world that it keeps producing this? The answer the tradition offered was, something was done at the beginning. Something was introduced into the world that should not have been there. Knowledge that was not meant for us, given by beings who should have been watching, not teaching. And the consequences of that introduction are still being felt, still working through the world, still producing what they produce. You are not responsible for the original crime. You didn't take the oath, you didn't descend, but you are living in its aftermath, and the aftermath is everything. This is, and here is the thing I can't quite pull back from saying, even though I know I'm getting close to editorializing. This is the most honest account of inherited suffering I know of in any ancient tradition. It does not say your suffering is your fault. It does not say your suffering is meaningless. It says something happened before you were born and it made the world the way it is, and you are living in that world, and the judgment that will finally address it has not yet come, but it will come. And when it does, the accounting will be complete. Is that comforting? I don't know. It might depend on which side of the accounting you are on. The philosophical dimension that is hardest to hold is the question of knowledge itself. The tradition treats the knowledge that Azazel teaches as inherently dangerous, not because it is false, but because it arrives too soon in the wrong hands without the context that would make it safe. Weapons are not evil. The ability to work metal is not evil. The knowledge of cosmetics is not evil. What makes them catastrophic in the Watcher story is the moment of their introduction into a world that is too young to handle them, too prone to violence, too unformed in its ethics to use power without destroying itself with it. This is, and maybe this is the anachronistic moment I promised, the modern sensibility surfacing and then retreating, because I am aware that what I'm about to say sounds less like ancient theology and more like a conversation that people are having right now about very specific technologies. This is a description of the problem of capability outrunning wisdom, of what happens when you can do something before you have developed the judgment to decide whether you should. The world is not made safer by knowledge, it is not ready for. The Watchers did not give humanity weapons out of cruelty. They may have given them out of love, out of the same desire to share that leads anyone who knows something beautiful to want to teach it to someone they care about. The teaching was a gift. The gift was a disaster. The tradition does not tell you how to prevent this. It does not offer a protocol for determining when knowledge is safe to share. It just tells you what happened when it was shared too soon and leaves you to draw whatever conclusions your particular moment requires. The final judgment, which the tradition describes in considerable apocalyptic detail in later sections of the Enochic literature and in texts that descend from it, is the structural resolution of everything the Watcher story puts in motion. Azazel will be released from the rocks in Dudael and cast into the fire. The Watchers will be released from the valleys of the earth and judged. The demon spirits will be gathered and destroyed. The accumulated weight of all the consequences of the original crime will be settled, finally, completely. What will the world look like afterward? The tradition varies. Some accounts speak of a transformation of the earth itself, a renewal, a new creation that is not a restart, but a completion. The world becoming what it was always meant to be before the contamination. Others speak of something harder to picture, a state of existence that the available language can only gesture at, the way you can gesture at a color you have never seen by pointing at the colors adjacent to it. What is consistent across the versions is the idea of finality, not cycle, not repetition, not another fall followed by another flood, an end, a settlement. The books opened, the accounting done, the verdict rendered, the sentence carried out. The Watcher's crime is not the kind of crime that can be endlessly deferred. It has a resolution, and the resolution is coming, and it will be complete. The 70 generations are almost up, or maybe they ended a long time ago, and we are in what comes after the judgment, and nobody quite knew what to do with that. So the stories kept going. The texts kept being copied. The knowledge kept being transmitted. Enoch kept walking with God, arriving somewhere just past the edge of what can be written down, standing in a place that the text cannot fully describe because description requires a frame, and Enoch has gone beyond all the available frames. He was, and then he was not, and God took him, and we are still here, in the world that was made and unmade and remade, watching the Watchers watch us from whatever station they now occupy, hoping that this time the distances hold, that the membrane is thick enough, that the ones appointed to observe will find it in themselves to remain at their post. But desire has always been stronger than distance, and the daughters of men are, in their infinite variety, very beautiful, and the mountain is still there, the mountain with the cursed name, and the stars on a clear night look like eyes arranged in patterns that almost mean something. The Watchers are watching, as they have always watched, as they were made to watch, and whether this is a comfort or a warning depends entirely on who is watching whom and what it is they want. Good night, drive safe, I'll see you next time, if that is, the stars stay in their proper courses, and the sons of heaven remember their station, and the world holds together for one more night, which it has done somehow, in spite of everything, for a very long time. I'll see you next time.